Welcome to Psychology Today. I'm your host, Tammy Richards. Thank you for joining us. Our show is about bicycling in general and bicycle safety specifically. We also like to highlight unique aspects of cycling that might be of interest to our viewers. I hope Psychology Today helps inspire you to ride a bike and helps you be more mindful of safety. We try to celebrate those in our community that incorporate bicycling into career choices or entrepreneurial endeavors, and strive to encourage others to ride or support cycling and bike safety. Before we meet our guests, I want to thank our skillful crew working behind the scenes, as well as our producer, the Northwest Bicycle Safety Council. The Northwest Bicycle Safety Council is working on its 2019 season of events, during which we will provide helmets for local cyclists who need one. We also provide helmet fittings at these events to ensure helmet effectiveness. Our show today will focus on cyclists who participate in the sport while managing challenging chronic medical conditions. Both of these individuals are members of the cycling team to which I belong, called Team Portland. This team participates in the AIDS LifeCycle ride in California, which is a 545-mile ride from San Francisco to Los Angeles, and benefits the San Francisco AIDS Foundation as well as the LA Gay and Lesbian Center. It's my privilege to introduce to you our guests today, David Duncan and Kristin Steele. Welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you with us today.
Thanks for having us.
So, could you each give us a little bit of background about yourselves?
Kristin?
Thanks, David. So, my name's Kristin. I've been in Portland since 1992. I was a bike commuter for a really long time before I got into road cycling about 7.5 years ago. I'm a fundraising consultant, so I work with nonprofits to help raise money. So charity rides, bike rides, and cycling kind of all came together for me.
Great. Dave?
Okay. I came to the West Coast in 1983 from Boston, and so you might hear a little bit of my old Boston accent in there. And I was in Los Angeles for quite a while, so pardon me, I was from California. And then San Francisco, and I moved up here with a couple of breaks in between for other purposes about 12 years ago. And I came up here from San Francisco and was at UC Berkeley for about 17 years or so. City planner, and I worked on planning the campus. When I moved up here, I had to go on to long-term disability, so I was looking at options that were a little less expensive than San Francisco, but it was far more the quality of life up here that what got me up here. And so I've been kind of officially retired for all these years, but over the years, both in San Francisco and up here, I just had a love for cycling, and it's been my most favorite hobby.
Awesome. That's great. So could you briefly both talk a little bit about the medical challenges that you've faced and how that has related to your participation in cycling? David, you get to start this time.
Okay. Well, I'll just say I'm HIV positive, and I found out I was positive in 1996, so it's been quite a long time. I'll just say that a lot of us have kind of a dark humor where we say most of us are realizing now we're going to die of old age, which is a good thing. But
Yes.
I was diagnosed in 1996, and so living with HIV, and it's often a challenge, but it's something that, well, essentially through cycling, I've been able to prove to myself and to others that it's simply now a controllable disease, and you can do a lot with having a disease like this. And then I did in about 7-8 years ago, I was on Cycle Oregon, another 7-day ride, and I collapsed and I had to stop doing the ride, and I found out I had a 3rd-degree heart block.
Oh, geez.
So I have a pacemaker. And so that kind of compounds the issues, and that has affected my cycling, but I just kind of carry on with it, and I've been carrying on.
Great. Kristin?
Sure. So, 2007, I was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic. So currently I am completely insulin dependent. I'm on a pump and a glucose monitor. And oddly, that's how I got into long distance road cycling. So we always kind of, dark humor again, talk about thanking Type 1 for getting us into cycling in this team. Late 2016, I was also diagnosed with Addison's, which is a failure of your adrenals, which is cortisol, and not to get into all of it, but basically your adrenaline functions, mine's compromised and on its way to bleeping out. So I am on supplemental steroids for that. So those pieces, I work with on the bike, and it was sort of like we just got our arms around figuring out Type 1, and then Addison's came into the picture. So just like cycling, it's sort of a dynamic space, and every day is different, but cycling has been a tool to manage both of those pieces, both physically but also psychologically, I think, in a lot of ways, and has brought me into a community of people that I can talk about those diseases with and be supported in those diseases with in a way that I'm not always in other aspects of my life, which is pretty amazing.
That's great. So adding to that, I'm wondering, how do you, or what might you do differently to manage those physical needs when you're on a long distance ride? Are there specific things that you have to do in order to be prepared, or in order to handle yourself on the road throughout the day? What types of things might you have to do?
Sure. So I know for me, we sort of jokingly refer to the big bag I carry on my handlebars as aisle 9, like aisle 9 of the grocery store, because I have so many snacks involved. So if anybody ever needs anything, I've always got pockets and bags stuffed with snacks. So that's sort of the biggest thing is, I think, anticipation, which I think is always good in long distance cycling, to think about where you're getting your fuel and what that's going to look like. But I don't have the luxury of sort of waiting for the next convenience store or gas station sometimes. So I think it's being contained and self-sufficient and thinking ahead about what that looks like. But I also have, I have a bunch of emergency protocols that I have to have. I have a glucagon pen for if my sugars go too low. I also have a steroid shot should something happen, and I have to have sort of those reserves to get through an emergency. So it's a consciousness on my part to make sure that I've always got stuff. I can never just jump on my bike and head out the door. There's some prep, and it used to feel really cumbersome, but it's just part of what we do now. And everybody around me, we have jokes about it and holds me accountable to it. So it feels less like a burden now, but certainly starting out, it felt like a lot to manage. And getting into long distance cycling itself, for anybody, disease or no disease, can be a huge thing. I mean, I remember some of our first rides, and disease or no, they're no joke, right? So you add that layer to it, and it can feel like a lot. But I think bringing other people into that space helps make it not feel like such a lift.
Awesome. David?
Yeah, well, with any cycling, especially if you start doing longer rides, you want to make sure you have a lot of you have water and you have some nutrition. With myself, or someone who's HIV positive, I'll tell a little story that's totally related to me. But on the it's LifeCycle ride, and when it was first started, it was called the AIDS Ride. There was another California AIDS Ride that was before AIDS LifeCycle. And after the first ride, there were a bunch of people who did the ride who were HIV positive, who found that there really weren't the services they needed on the ride that was different than a regular rider who needs the nutrition and hydration and all that stuff. And back then, that was early 1990s, and the cocktail was just out several years before, and quite a lot of the medications needed to be refrigerated. There were special needs. I'll just say that. I won't get into all of them, but there were special needs that weren't thought of, weren't understood, weren't thought of. And it wasn't by any means malicious. It was simply they just didn't know about these issues.
Sure.
And so this group called Positive Peddlers started. as an advocacy group because, hey, we need this and this and this. And the founder was one of these pushy types. And so he just pushed and pushed. Jonathan Pond, his name was, and got it. And the group stayed together because it was really a group of people that, obviously of a light condition for support. I won't get into the rest of it, but and so those some of those issues like refrigeration, what have you, did change. But I remember one ride that I had to get really on AIDS LifeCycle's back because I noticed in the rest stops there wasn't any Ensure, which is a nutritional supplement, protein supplement, and it's really important for some people to be able to have access to it. And so I raised a ruckus, and the next time I got to a rest stop,
ruckus?
I can raise a ruckus once in a while, yeah. And the Ensure was there, and there's things like that you just have to be really aware of, and kind of like Kristin, though not as acute. We do have to make sure we are getting enough nutrition during the day, and drinking enough water, and also remembering to take our meds. Frankly, we all have to if we have a condition.
Sure, of course. Do either one of you, or did either one of you ever think that cycling was something that you wouldn't be able to do because of the conditions that you live with every day? Was there ever a time where you thought, this just isn't going to work for me, there's no way that I can do this?
Well, when I first started to cycle with any kind of, with a purpose, cycling with a purpose, it was because of my HIV diagnosis, and that first year of training, and I think you can both relate to this, like, but, oh my God, I'm never going to get up this hill, and I was really concerned that that my condition will prevent me from going forward with it. But as I've told many people, it's really is mind over matter, and sort of it's just a hill. I've said that before, and
we may have heard that a few times.
These guys have heard it a few times, but it's really was seeing that it's meeting a challenge and saying I'm going to do it. If I can't make it, then we'll go from there. But it was one cycle at a time, rotation at a time, and off we went.
Yes, well, I think I speak for everybody on Team Portland. David has been one of our most avid and encouraging trainers ever. He's certainly helped to train me for my second ALC, and very inspirational guy you are, David, for certain. This is sort of a more general kind of question. What is your favorite part of cycling? Is it the sense of community? Is it seeing things from a new perspective? Is it meeting new people? Or what do you like best about it?
Sure. Yes, to all of those things. I think the biggest piece about getting into cycling, and I happened to drop into this group of people because I signed up for AIDS LifeCycle. My wife and I both did, and we kind of dropped into this amazing team that's become family to me. And they're people I can't imagine my life without. And so that piece I wouldn't have had. I think the other piece too is, back to what you were just asking, is that the people I was told no to long distance cycling by were my medical practitioners. Oh. They looked at what I wanted to do. I said I want to ride 545 miles in 7 days, and they couldn't figure out how that could happen because either no one had said that to them before or that wasn't on their roadmap, and they just said don't, instead of extending a hand and saying let's figure out how to do this. And so this band of merry pranksters I hooked up with all looked at me every ride and said, I don't know how to do this, but let's figure out how to do it. And so that's a really amazing space to be with people in, where we can look at something and say, on paper, this may not pencil out right, but who knows, let's try it. And every ride we just kept trying it. I mean, David and I were talking about this not too long ago. You know, that first year, there were many times that my wife Sam and I were pulled over on the side of the road trying to figure out glucose numbers and dosing and food, and David would just come up and say, "What do you need?" And we would say, "I don't know." And he would say, "Okay, let's start there." And I think that's probably been the best start. There's something about cycling that's literally just one pedal stroke after another pedal stroke after another pedal stroke, and not to get too metaphorical about it, but I think there is something in that for me as a very type A OCD sort of person about trusting some process to get through this medical unknown. And it actually really put me in the driver's seat, but that was cycling as much as the people I had around me and the community that I made doing that, I think, in a lot of ways.
Well, you know, cycling is a wonderful sport. It's a wonderful activity. Yeah, you see amazing places, and you know, we train in amazing locales, and but much like Kristin, I will say when I started the ride, I had no idea that I could do it. This is like literally when I got on the ride, and there was a series of families. I'd say it was the family of AIDS the AIDS ride back then. And then I very quickly became part of a very close family that I'm still part of as Positive Peddlers. And then way back, I was the training ride leader back in California. And the love of being able to see people, go from I can't do it to doing it is amazing. And much like Kristin just said about the Merry Pranksters.
Merry Band of Pranksters.
Merry Band of Pranksters, but we probably are. But we are. But it's amazing. It's the family that you have on the ride. Kristin talks about, me coming up to you guys, but I remember the last time I did the ride, you were so determined to not get, because I was having trouble, and she would not, I kept saying, oh, go ahead. And she just sat there on her bike, and just like I would, and I'm not moving. So that's family. That as much as I would get frustrated, but I just
Sure.
knew she would be there.
Yep.
Yeah, and others. So it's really the family and the community that you get while you cycle is nothing like it. It really isn't.
I can't agree with you more.
Spandex wearers are a special breed.
There you go.
It takes a certain amount of moxie to say, yes, I'm wearing this outfit,
Yeah, I know,
and I'm going
really.
to get on this really skinny bike seat, and I'm going to go ride these insane amount of distances.
Yeah.
So you've already kind of cut away some of the...
Once you're willing to do that in front of other people, you're like, let's just go.
That's right.
That's fantastic. So how did you get into, well, you've sort of covered this in some ways, but how did you decide to do your first long-distance fundraising ride? And what was that?
Well, it's LifeCycle, or the AIDS ride way back. It's interesting. I had, I said I had been diagnosed, and I heard about this ride, and I went down on orientation day to help people, to sign people up. And this is the year before I rode, and I was like, what are these insane people doing, riding all this, and they're all happy. And they're going to ride all these miles tomorrow. And, it really gave me such a charge to see that and to understand that. And that's really what got me on the bike. And my best friend and I did it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so our first big long distance ride was also AIDS LifeCycle. The year before my wife and I did it, a friend had signed up, and we had kind of tracked his journey, and we both decided that it was a community that we wanted to be a part of, and a cause we really wanted to lean in and support. And so kind of on dares, we just signed up, and then we were like, wow, I'm rider number blah, 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 and I've got to get from San Francisco to LA somehow, And so I think there's something about picking something that feels impossible and is so much bigger than you. And when it feels scary, that probably means you're on the right path. And so it was all of it. It was the physical challenge of it. It was the beautiful country it went through. It was most definitely the cause, and the community that sort of drew us to that ride.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give to somebody who might have medical challenges, who thinks that they can't do something, such as a long-distance ride or even just cycling on a day-to-day basis? What advice would you give them?
This is not medically endorsed. I'll just lay that out as a disclaimer.
You don't play a doctor on TV?
I don't play a doctor on TV.
Yeah.
But I think that often, and in many cases rightfully so, the medical community is set up to keep you safe, to really make sure that you're okay. And saying yes to physical activities out on the side of the road or out on the side of a highway for anybody can be a challenge. I think when you add medical layers to that, people get worried for you, and I think that's fine. But I think if it's something you want to do, my guess is there's a path to get you there. It may mean that you need to find a different group of people to hang out with to provide you the sounding board to get there. It may mean that you need to start trying to talk to other people that are doing that are sharing some of your obstacles, to figure out if there are different tools outside of just kind of this narrow window of what's known. I think, if I had listened to folks, I'd still be a bike commuter and I would have missed out on a whole lot. That doesn't mean you don't do it safely. I mean, every time I go out riding by myself, I send my wife a GPS tracker and she follows my blood glucose level. So at any point, somebody knows where I am and how I am. It's not this brazen sort of I'm going out the door to ride 100 miles and it doesn't matter what happens. I think there are things you need to do to keep yourself safe, and there are things that you need to do. But I also think we get into these spaces where diseases become the limiting factor instead of, well, what do your legs want to do today versus, what's your brain going to let you do today? And that's a big thing. So I think it's okay to push, and I think it's okay to push back a little and ask for different kinds of support than is just sort of the top few on the list. And my guess is that you have some similar things around that. But I think caution can be a limiting factor, and I don't know that it always needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I totally agree with Kristin. I'll stop there. No, no, I do totally agree with Kristin. Kristin's a training ride leader as well, so she knows how people are and feel when they the first day we go out on a ride, especially if they're not, they haven't been cyclists. And I'll give a good example of it's one person we both know and love, all know and love so well as Kay.
Okay. Yes.
And when Kay first approached me, before she did the ride, before she went training for the ride, she just wanted to get from commuting or a bike around town type of situation to I want to challenge myself. And she was 70 years old when she wanted to get on a road bike and really start to ride. And what I said to her, well, let's just see how we go. And there's nothing, there's no, we on our ride, our big ride, it's LifeCycle, we always say it's a ride, not a race.
Right.
And you ride at your own pace. And Kay, being 70, was slow, is still slow. I mean,
not on the downhill.
But no, Kay, she's far faster than any one of us combined. All of us combined, probably.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But, I remember taking on just some rides around town, Springwater Corridor type of thing, but I got up her first hill, and you won't believe this, but I was a chatty Cathy the whole way up, and and I said, oh my God, look at we're at the top of the hill, and it changed her own attitude about it. It's like, oh, I just went up, for her at that time, this big hill. And And she went up many more big hills after that and decided she wanted to train for the ride. Her daughter had been on the ride many, many years, actually both daughters, 2 daughters. And so we all trained together. And that's not a medical condition, but that's an age is a condition. I mean, I'm 66 now, and it's sort of, let's get on your bike and see how it goes. And we might see some of our limitations, but let's just, like I said, see how it goes. We can say that for ourselves when we started.
Kay is absolutely one of the most inspirational folks I've ever seen.
It's true.
When you're sitting there whining in your brain about, how am I ever going to do this? Why am I doing this? This is insane. And then you see this sweet little 70-year-old woman chucking up the hill in front of you. You're like, okay, I guess I can make this happen.
Yeah.
She's
exactly
amazing.
Right.
Unbelievable.
Exactly right.
And always so positive, which was, one of my favorite things about
exactly
riding
right.
with her, for sure. So let's see here. We have a couple minutes before we get to our video. What is the next organized ride that you might participate in, if you have one on your radar?
Sure. As a type 1 diabetic, I've made a personal commitment to the American Diabetes Association Tour to Cure ride. It's an annual ride here in Portland. I ride as a Red Rider, as a type 1. And that's just something for me to sort of own my disease, I've used it to battle my own stigma around the disease. And it's a way for me to just sort of be a part of the type 1 community in a really concrete way. AIDS LifeCycle is always kind of one of those, this year, not this year, this year, not this year. We did it for several years in a row, and it's a large endeavor, and so we've kind of moved on to every other year, every couple years, so that always kind of hangs out there. And then just, lots of fun rides wherever possible with the gang, yeah.
David?
I don't have anything on my plate. I haven't been on a bike for quite a while, for a variety of reasons. But I do want to get back on it. Much to most people's amazement, I thought maybe I can do one more AIDS LifeCycle ride, because I've participated in 19. I want to get to that magic number of 20 somehow, and I've done the Tour de Cure. I would love to do that again. I've done the Seattle to Portland ride quite a few times as well. And I would love to also help as much as I can, help people train for AIDS LifeCycle this coming year. Hopefully on my bike, if not in a car, which I've done for quite a few years.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I think that we're ready to go ahead and get to our video now, and so I'll turn it over to our capable crew for video time.
500 men and women stepped off on the adventure of a lifetime.
Everyone here is riding for someone.
Think of my friends that I've lost, my lover I lost 2 years ago.
Every step of the way, we've drawn attention to this very important cause.
The first San Francisco to Los Angeles bike ride to fight HIV was founded by the Los Angeles LGBT Center, produced by Pilata and Associates, and called California AIDS Ride. The May 1994 inaugural ride included 478 cyclists who raised what was then an astounding $1.5 million. In 1995, the center invited San Francisco AIDS Foundation to share in the success of the event by partnering on future rides. California AIDS Ride 2 included 1,859 riders and raised an amazing $5.3 million. In 2002, the Center and San Francisco AIDS Foundation founded AIDS LifeCycle. They parted ways with Pilata and Associates to reduce event costs and keep the focus of the event on HIV. Every year since then, the community has come together for one purpose: ending HIV and AIDS.
I did my first ride in 1994, May 1st. Cold. It's cold. That's all I remember, it's so cold. I've been involved with the ride for 22 years. It's addictive.
This will be my 19th ride down the coast. Hard to believe, but yes, 19 rides.
We've been riding for 17 years.
And intend to until there's a cure.
What keeps me going is honoring the memory of the friends that I've lost. We probably lost 50 friends to HIV and AIDS.
Family members have passed, cousins, and for them to pass away so early, it's very difficult.
I really like the Ride for the People. There's like this unwritten code that you treat each other well, and people live by it.
It's just bringing everybody together and saying we are family.
You see all of these people and all of these characters of the ride, and there are people that want to be involved, and they found their own way to get involved in this ride.
The laughter, the things people wear.
They really make it a week of entertainment, like a vacation.
We ride because it's a lot easier than being a roadie.
I would say roadies are the backbone of the ride.
Everything that you could possibly think of and more, the roadies do.
They're very positive, they're energized, they're like good parents.
I think our presence as a big group of riders and the fact that we come off with a good attitude and funny and theatrical, I think it does raise awareness for these smaller towns.
A lot of these cities know and expect us. You have people that just come out and just cheer you on.
Seeing this group of people committed to this cause, you can't capture that on the media. You can't capture it any way but experiencing it.
To be able to see the spectacular golden sun, the beautiful blue ocean, and to be on AIDS LifeCycle doing something positive for somebody who is positive is just beautiful and wonderful. AIDS LifeCycle is the most spectacular, challenging event in my life.
I don't even know what to say after that video. It brings back so many memories. I participated in 4 AIDS LifeCycles, and every one of them was made a huge impact on my life in so many different ways. And what they said about the community and that sense of doing something that is not only has a positive impact on so many different people, but being involved in such a fun community while doing something so incredibly difficult, there's just nothing like it. The person said something about it being addictive. I think David is a great example of that.
Oh, sure.
19 times. But yeah, I think that that these types of rides are not only gratifying for those that they benefit, but for those that participate in a lot of different ways. Absolutely. Just a quick note to our viewers. We had Ellie Blue and Joe Beal from Bike Works and Officer David Sanders from the Portland Police Bureau as guests last month. And so if viewers want to check out that archived show for information on the Bike Works event, as well as information about preventing bike theft, you can check those out in the archives on the Northwest Bicycle Safety Council website. Just also another tip, most groups and clubs ride all year, so as the weather turns cooler and damper, don't worry. There's lots of groups out there. You can get out and ride no matter what the weather in our fantastic Portland area. So let's move on to a few more questions. What local events here in the Portland metro area, or even other areas within Oregon, would you recommend for a cyclist's first event cycling experience?
I think in terms of events and thinking about, just getting out and feeling comfortable on your bike, I think the Sunday Parkways routes are fantastic. They're close to traffic. You can find one in a neighborhood if you're in Portland near you. They're all over town. They also help you get to know the greenways around town and bike routes around town so that you can start to imagine finding your way around town. There are also great programs. The Street Trust has a women bike program that's all about sort of reducing the barriers to getting women out on bikes, feeling comfortable on bikes, rides. They have group rides. And then, from there you can migrate up to something like Cycle Oregon's Joyride, which is a women-specific day ride. And so we live in a place where no matter what your passion is, you can do it on a bike, you can do a pub crawl, you can do wine tours, you can do night rides, you can do, I mean, whatever it is that's your jam, there's a group of people out there doing it on a bike, I think.
That's right. And you can night rides naked.
You can, if you're so inclined, yes.
You
yes.
can.
You can. I wouldn't want to, but you can do that.
We will not be on the naked rides, but if you're into that, it's all good.
Yeah. Well, what Kristin said, and I just think that there are a lot of bike groups, organizations of all kinds. You can go on to Meetup, you can go on to all kinds of other social network groups and what have you, and find like-minded people, groups, what have you. That sometimes the larger rides, like Seattle to Portland, are daunting.
Yeah.
Because there's 11,000 of your closest friends on the ride, and it's wacko compared to AIDS LifeCycle. And so a smaller group or a smaller ride or things like much more casual, like Sunday Parkways, would be the way for a beginning cyclist to start going.
Yeah, it can be daunting, the thought of riding in a group, for sure.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
you riding on your bike and figuring all that out and how your bike works and what that looks like. And then there's adding people around you and cars and all of those things. So I think, kind of working your way up instead of just biting off something huge like Seattle to Portland right out of the gate is a great
Please don't do that, yeah.
It's a great idea. Yeah, absolutely.
So related to that, what kind of things can you talk about that would be helpful for cyclists to know as far as riding in a group? If it's their first time riding in a group, or if they've done it for a long time, what are some of the key things to remember that are most important, not only for safety, but just for making the experience more enjoyable and less stressful?
Well, one thing that both Kristin and I know very well and use, but as training ride leaders, is the rules of the road that AIDS LifeCycle goes by are some of the best that you can ask for. Being extremely courteous to people. A lot of people don't do this, but when you're passing somebody, pass only on the left. Don't surprise them and say that you're coming up on your left. Don't. What's the word when you get right behind somebody?
Tailgate.
Pardon?
Tailgate.
Draft.
Yeah.
Tailgate. Well, kind of tailgate. Yeah.
Same. Yeah.
Same thing. It's just keep a certain space around you. Be very aware of everything around you. You have to be extremely aware when you're on city streets. Even if you're in a bike lane, there are car doors, there are things in the road that you just have to watch out for. So it's really being, as much as you're enjoying the ride, the route, is to constantly be aware of what's around you, to protect yourself. It's really to defend yourself and protect yourself.
Yeah, I think it's thinking about being as visible as possible. Lights, even when it's light outside, are a great idea. I'm a helmet always sort of person. We've all got one brain, and it seems like an easy way to keep it working. But I think also though that can feel like, oh my gosh, how am I going to stay safe? What's going to happen? And that can start to make the ride start to feel like a burden. So I think just knowing that practicing all of these things as you ride, all of a sudden they become second nature and become part of the ride. And we're sitting here thinking about them and coming up with a list, but you incorporate it into how you ride and what you do. And it makes you a better citizen on the road for the cars that are around you and the bikes that are around you, and it'll get you from point A to point B better.
Yeah, I tend to always think about the fact that bikes don't have tail lights, so there's no way for someone to know who's behind you if you're stopping or if you're slowing down until they're up hitting you in the back. And so always doing those hand signals to let people know, or calling out, saying slowing, saying stopping, which sometimes can seem like, well, isn't it obvious that I'm stopping? But not when you're coming right up on someone and you have no visual way to tell that they're slowing down. And I think it also helps cars be more aware of people too. If you're moving your arms and giving them visual signals and that sort of thing. And my personal pet peeve, please stop at stop signs. Stop all the way at stop signs. Yeah. It's really dangerous if you don't. Let's see here. What can you tell me are differences between cycling for recreation and cycling in a fundraising ride, other than the obvious, which is you're raising money in one and not in the other? Right. What are the biggest differences between event rides that may or may not be fundraising rides?
I think for me, when I'm riding in a charity ride, I'm and a lot of times riding with sort of hopes and wishes of my donors riding with me, particularly on AIDS LifeCycle. A lot of people have donated and are asking me to ride in memory of someone in their life, and that's another layer to ride with, and to be doing that to honor people and to create visibility and to reduce stigma. Those are just pieces I think about when I'm on those rides. They don't necessarily change how I'm riding or what I'm doing, but it adds a layer of motivation that sometimes, on a ride when I'm just out, if I look at the hill and say, I don't know today, it's easier to bogue out, right? But when you have sort of these people pushing you gently, nicely, encouragingly up this hill, sometimes you're like, no, I'm not going to quit today. I'm not going to stop right now. And I think for me, that's a big difference. When I ride for me, it's different things. I'm putting different challenges in front of myself for me and what I want to be doing. But I think the ride itself, it's about being a part of that community in that moment and being present and being with who you're with and seeing where you go.
Yeah, it's riding with purpose. Yeah. And for a purpose. Yeah. And especially with AIDS LifeCycle and Tour de Cure, it's that sense of community that on AIDS LifeCycle, that 2,500 other people, 600 roadies crew are doing the same thing, and we're raising this money for these two organizations, raising awareness all the way down the coast. There's nothing like that, and yes, same thing as Kristin. I've gone out and ridden my bike, and it's really pretty, going to Vista House or wherever. But I'd far prefer it to be riding like that, especially on long distance rides, for a purpose. And there's what they call on the ride the love bubble. It's something that does come forward every ride, even with different people, and you're just so enveloped in that awareness. And again, with my condition and having a lot of people around me, about 10% of the riders who are HIV positive, gives me a lot of moral support, all kinds of support, all the support you can imagine. And there's nothing like that. And it gets me up the hill.
Yeah. And there's nothing like signing up for some big ride to hold you accountable for training. I will say that as well. Yeah. So if you really, really want to be in the trenches and be held honest in your training, pick a goal. And picking a ride is a great goal, and sign up, and you're kind of on the line. Mm-hmm. You got to figure it out.
Well, let's see here. So you may have already sort of covered this, but I'm not going to make any assumptions. What is your most favorite cycling event that you've ever done? Everyone's like, what?
My first year on AIDS LifeCycle was in the top 10 things I've ever done in my life, and certainly probably top 3 as an adult. It changed me in some fundamental molecular way, and it was all of it. I rode every inch of 545 miles, and who thought that was ever going to be possible, right? And but I met this group of amazing people that I see all the time and ride with all the time now, and was a part of something that as adults, I don't know that we often get. We talk about this sometimes. There's not always an opportunity to meet new people and make new friends in the same way as when you start school or start a job or, all those sorts of things. And to find this sort of niche community of passionate people who love riding bikes as much as you do and are as engaged in the causes that you're engaged in is pretty amazing. And there's nothing like seeing the world on a bike. I mean, I've been places on my bike that I wouldn't be otherwise. I mean, when we trained all over around Portland and out the gorge, and it's kind of incredible to be driving somewhere and see a road sign and be like, wait a minute, we've ridden this. I've never been out here before, and so it sort of gave me the gift of where I live in a very different way. And I think about where I live in a very different way. I think about it in terms of, can I bike there? What's that look like? Yeah. What's a route there going to look like? So
I got to split it into 2 rides. The first, much like Kristin, was my first AIDS ride in '96, and AIDS Ride 4. And I remember going there with this huge amount of stigma that just weighted down my shoulders and all that stuff. And I remember my best friend saying to me, "Oh, there's a group over there, and they've got a big HIV sign. You should go over and talk to them." And I just remember, I'm not going to go talk to them. Everybody will know I'm positive. And finally worked my way over there. But they gave me a flag to put on my bike, the back of my bike. And he didn't use these words, but on TV I won't use them. But when we were about ready to go off on the ride, I still had the bike. We're literally at the starting gate, if you will. I had the flag in my hand. And he said, "Will you put that gosh darn flag on your bike or not? Are you going to?" And I finally jammed it on, and I remember one hill I went up, and tough hill, and I was talking to some guy that was behind me. And we were talking, and he finally said how much he both admired and how much of an inspiration I was, having a positive peddler jersey and a flag on me. And I never even had to fathom that I could be an inspiration to anybody. And then being with this group of positive people was such an amazing turnaround for me. I was head of the organization for many years after that, and the family that I have, it's funny, it's not just in Portland because I've been associated with the ride for so long. I have most of my friends are associated with the ride. They're friends from Los Angeles, friends from San Francisco, friends from Portland, and other places. But and we have so many other interests besides that. And the other one was one of the later AIDS rides, where one particular event or moment just also affects me still. We were riding in the small town, out of the small town of Guadalupe in Southern California, and at that point they would steer the riders near schools and other places where kids, high school, grammar school kids could see us and talk to us, and the kids knew why we were riding, not just a bunch of riders with funny outfits on. And we came out to the school, and this bunch of kids were at literally a white picket fence handing out paper mache leis. And one little boy, 8, 9-year-old, handed me one, and I had a positive peddler jersey on, which kind of like screams that you're positive. And he looks at the jersey, looks at me, looks back at the jersey, and then looks back again and says, which is like a kid of 9 or 8 can be so honest about, you know this.
Sure, I do.
He said, "Are you sick?" And I said, "I have a disease, but I'm not sick. I'm doing okay." And then he said to me, "My uncle has HIV, and so does his boyfriend. I hope you get better." And I said, "Thank you," and rode off. I swear for 5 more miles I was sobbing because, you know, that little kid has so much of understanding in this little tiny town in the middle of nowhere in California, knew more about, you know, empathy and all that than most city kids do.
Yeah.
And that always has been a great memory. I still have the lay.
That's awesome.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great story. I remember the first time I rode, I never thought I could do anything. I was the kind of person who basically took extra classes in school so I could avoid PE because it's hard and I don't like running. And so I decided to take up cycling after I had my second child, and I decided I should do something. And I was essentially going to ride my bike from my house to the Starbucks, which was 7 miles away. That was my goal, 7 miles. And I met another friend of mine who had been a lifelong athlete and like the antithesis of everything I'd ever done in my whole life as far as athletics. And she said, "Oh, I hear you're riding a bike." I met her at a wedding randomly. And she said, "You know, you should do this bike ride down in California." And I'm like, well, I don't know. I'd never done a group ride. I'd only ridden by myself. And I said, "Okay, you know, I'll do it. And let me know what it is." She goes, "Well, go on Netflix and watch the Netflix movie called The Ride." And I'm like, "Okay." And I watched it and I was like, 545 miles, are you insane? And I never thought I could do anything like that. It is by far the most physical thing that I've ever done, the most athletic thing I've ever done as a person who has never considered herself an athlete. And the first year that I did it, I rode every single mile. I couldn't believe it. And at one point I had a similar experience to David where, you know, I rode because I had 3 friends who passed away from HIV, and I had their names on my jersey. And I was riding up a hill in another very small town, and you become so involved in especially the first time that you do something like this, in just completing the miles, sometimes you lose sight of what you're doing in the moment. And I looked over and there was a woman who was clearly quite ill, sitting in a lawn chair, and she had an umbrella because it was very hot. And she was holding a sign and it said, "Thank you for riding for me." And it still makes me sad, obviously. I mean, it like inspires me, but at the same time, it's just something that you don't realize until you participate in something like that. The community sense of the love bubble and all of that is something that is so hard to explain to someone who hasn't been involved in it. But I mean, clearly we can't say enough about this ride. But this is not only the only type of thing that you can, the only type of ride that you can get this from. I mean, there are other rides that may speak more to you and the viewers based on your life experiences and what feels important to you. But I know that, like you said, it profoundly changes you in some really incredible way. I certainly never thought I'd sign up to do it a second time, let alone 4 times. But the years that I don't do it, I miss it because it's such an incredible experience.
I think it's about community,
Yeah.
right? And so I think we're talking about AIDS LifeCycle because that's our community.
Sure.
But I think that's the great thing about getting involved in whatever your passion is or your cause is or whatever that is. It's about that human need and drive to find community. And when you find that space, you flourish.
Yeah.
And so I think that community exists regardless for everybody.
I agree. So we're getting close to wrapping up here. Do you have any parting thoughts, any words of wisdom you'd like to share with the viewers before we call it a night?
I think for me, if you want to be on the bike and you want to go somewhere, do it. If you've got diseases that you're managing and there's so many other obstacles, right? Like that's one thing, but I think obstacles become a big hang up. If you want to do it, there's a way to do it. And you'll find people who will cheerlead and encourage and go with you there. So I think if it's something you want to do, make that the priority and make that the focus. And the other stuff irons itself out.
Yeah, this is, you certainly can, say if you do have a condition, you can challenge yourself and get on the bike and create your own mind over matter experience, but having other people around you of like condition or not get you motivated, get you up those hills, and it's an amazing experience to be how much you see, you feel that when you're not in on a car, that you see on a bicycle. It's a great sport, and I encourage everybody to simply get on the bike and see what you can do, like I said earlier.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I want to thank you both for coming and sitting through my questioning and chatting with all of the viewers and everyone tonight. So again, I'd like to express my sincere thanks to David Duncan and Kristin Steele for appearing on Psychology Today. The Northwest Bicycle Safety Council promotes safe riding, both by obeying the laws and by riding with a level of skill. Former Northwest Bicycle Safety Council President Bruce Buffington and current President Ann Morrow both have rides listed at www.pwtc.com, the Portland Wheelman Touring Club. They have many slower and easier rides to help you test the cycling waters if you're new to the sport. Just bring your bike and a helmet, and they'll be ready to go. By riding with others, you can increase your skill, learn new routes, learn how to ride in groups, find out about other rides and events, and make new friends. We'd really love to see you out on the road. And as the Portland Wheelmen like to say, take life by the handlebars. Set some smaller goals for yourself and let other cyclists help you attain them. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter as well. By the way, when you're riding with a group or when you find yourself in a group, please be sure to use your voice and/or hand signals to indicate that you're slowing or stopping. Communication and proper protocol can prevent a crash, not to mention everyone around you will appreciate knowing your intentions. Hand signals are the law, and if you have a child in your life learning how to ride, they should practice this as well. Check out our website, and you can learn more about us there. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good night.